Let's check out Star Citizen Live this week, going over the Beyond New Worlds, whatever. It's a follow-up to the Star Engine panel with a Q&A.
We're doing follow-up questions from the Brave New Worlds and Star Engine and Genesis presentation. We earlier this week we put up a thread on Spectrum, which is our bespoke communication platform available.
I asked a question on the thread. We'll see if it made it in.
Submit your questions. Vote up which ones you wanted to see answered most. Then we let our 4 guests here loose on the thread, and they collected the ones that they were most capable of talking about now. As is always the case in game development, things that are much further out are a little too subject to change, so we do try to keep our questions and our conversation related to within the next year of content. So most
what
of
was
what
my
we're talking
question
about today
Man, I don't even
will be
remember.
related to the next year and possibly
Oh my God.
the year after
Why?
that, depending on specifically.
Okay, I was gonna say, why does Twitch not just pause when I press spacebar? I don't remember what my question was, to be honest. We could probably go look it up real quick. We should look it up real quick just in case it does get asked. Holy crap, it got 62 freaking votes. Wait, it got pretty high up here. The question was, what we saw during the panel was impressive, but could we hear more about how these tools have quantifiably made planet generation faster and higher quality? So I guess basically just like, how is all this being applied into making planets faster? Are you seeing progress when you're creating Nyx or Castra? Something like that. Did I spell what wrong? Still got the upvotes though. So, nobody cares about
keep
education.
That in mind when wondering why we're choosing certain questions over other questions, and let's get to it. Our first question, maybe this is for Seb, we'll see. It says, will Genesis allow you to create more alien-looking biomes and worlds using the Earth-like biomes as a base?
Yeah, I guess it's more like a content side question than like a tech limitation. Genesis never, like Planetary never really limited us in terms of what we can do. It's more like what we do on the content side and making it realistic. Obviously we've made a really nice progress already towards getting closer to what Earth and nature has to offer. It's always our primary target and goal, just because it's familiar and it's a really great reference point. And now we're really looking forward to doing more alien things and adding things that make it feel less familiar and just different, but without going into the uncanny valley kind of thing. So it's a balancing act, but we have a nice baseline now, and now we just go from there.
Give me those No Man's Sky planets.
More and better and alien and
Dude, they have amazing concept art for this game. Like, they don't even need to pretend like they don't know what planets we want because they're the ones who have made them. You just go to any of their pictures back here and you look through some of the stuff they've made. And they're not even crazy ideas. This is just a desert planet, but it looks cool. It's got cool, larger mega structures that just aren't just like rocks sitting on the plain. Or there's one picture I really like, particularly. It's like there's a giant canyon on this fractured looking planet. And I'm not sure if it's in this collection. But there's plenty that they could do with these planets. And I can't wait. I know they wanted to really get them to a place where they were able to create just basic planets. They wanted to get basic planets, like New Babbage is the poster child for what you would want to be able to create from Microtech. And they've gotten that done. So I think now is the time for them to start getting a little more creative with things like this, which are pretty cool things. Oh, you see that? You see how it just signed me in with using my eyeballs? That was the eye tracker. Okay, stop. Yeah, I don't think the picture that I'm looking for is here, though. But they're getting there. You can tell with some of the Pyro planets, with details like this. Like, they're clearly trying to get a little bit weirder with their designs. So we're getting there. Yeah, Castra's there too.
Do you think we'll eventually get to something that's just completely unrecognizable, something far more? I'm thinking like Felucia in Star Wars or something, where it's all a bunch of magentas and neon blues and stuff like that. Just a completely alien world. Is that something we're working towards?
It's definitely, we've tried this in the past. Actually, Hurston was meant to be like blue trees in the beginning.
Whoa,
and we
that's right.
iterated onto it, and it ended up being more or less Africa now. But yeah, we'll definitely try that again and again until we get it right. But it has to feel good and feel believable and make for a nice experience to be in the place.
So they're going to get there at some
But it's
point.
definitely on the
Oso system has a jungle, which looks pretty crazy.
I think.
Okay. Next question. What we saw during the panel was impressive. Agree.
Holy crap, this is my question!
But could we hear more about how these tools have
What? That's sick.
quantifiably made planet generation faster and of higher quality?
Well, quantifiable is a weird word here because we're not done. So we haven't measured how long it takes to make a planet because we can't make a whole planet yet. But the design and the whole way that we've built this tech is with speed of iteration and quality in mind. We're already getting quantifiably better quality in areas, and we want to keep working until all of the areas are of a higher quality as well. But also, we can't kind of measure how quick all this will be until it's done, until all the supporting systems are done. So just because we can pump out a planet in a day doesn't necessarily mean we can work out everything else that makes that planet an interesting and unique location. That requires content from all sorts of other things, from narrative to level design to locations to lore. There's no point pumping out a million alien worlds that are all lifeless. They've got to have meaning, and that's kind of what we've done really nicely with Pyro, I think.
Yeah, you make a good point there. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ali.
I was going to say, just to clarify, we're also not going to be pumping out a planet in a day or a million planets, though.
Certainly not.
I mean, it's as long as a piece of string, isn't it? You could pump out something in a day, whether it's of the, worthy of releasing in a day would be a very different question. Right.
Maybe I asked the question the wrong way, but I'm mainly wondering if you were going to make a planet like Pyro 4, I guess. One of the big things that they were telling us back when they went from Planetech V2 to V3 or V3 to V4 were the speed changes that they saw. So like it took them, I think 2 months with 3 people to make 3 moons or something like that. And then they went from that to being able to make like 2 moons in 2 weeks with 1 person. And they were able to kind of quantify how much their new tools were helping them make better things. But I guess at this point, it's less speed because they got fast enough. And now it's more, they're just trying to make things more better. And I guess since the system is not done enough for them to be putting everything together all with one click, they don't know how it would go. But I would then love to hear, what is the pipeline for like, if there are a bunch of things that you need to talk to, from the narrative people to the mission people, how is that pipeline shaping up to look like? What would be realistically expected? What is your guys' target, let's say, for wanting to make a planet that includes a landing zone in 5 years? Would that be like we want to do that in 1 year kind of thing? We want to do that in 1 year and stagger them so that there's a release every quarter? That's what interests me. Either way, glad they read my question. Appreciate that they answered it. Don't know if it's the answer I was looking for, but they answered it. Either way.
Right. No, Will, I really like your answer. Basically, there's what the tools can do, but there's still so many more aspects that go into creating a planet at the scale and fidelity of Star Citizen. So the Genesis tools and everything will streamline one aspect of that, but as you point out, there is still narrative, there is still creature creation, there's still all these other things that make a planet thrive. So we won't know how fast this improves the process until we crank out a couple more, as we go through Nyx and then Castra and then eventually Terra.
See, now that's kind of what I was hoping to hear. So I was thinking, when I was typing this question out, in my mind I was thinking, well, they clearly they're in pre-production with Castra, so they must be working on Planets of Nyx right now, or maybe just worked on Planets of Nyx. Maybe they were building these out with the Nyx, and I was hoping maybe they would say something like, oh yeah, we made so-and-so in Nyx in this amount of time. We went back through and updated, remember back when they were doing this before, they would talk about how they updated the whole Stanton system in a corner. Wouldn't it be cool for them to be like, oh yeah, we finished out this planet and updated all of Stanton's planets in a couple of weeks with this system, and the quality level went up. But I guess they're not at that stage. And as Jared's kind of saying here, it sounds like they still got work to do on Nyx, but he might be misspeaking, so we won't read too much into that. But ultimately, that was kind of what I was looking for with this kind of question, was just talk about where things are going with the planets that they're working on right now. Who knows what that means for Nyx?
Terra after that. So it's one of those things. I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to be talking about Genesis or planets and stuff like this. And as we learn these answers, we'll share more.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Thanks for answering the question, y'all.
Letting the hyperbole get a little ahead of me.
No, that's like, no, it's easy to get carried away. It's easy to get
the millions of planets. Anyways, pretty cool.
away. It's we're in year 13. We try to be very responsible with how much we promise at this point. It's about doing the work and actually getting the work done now. One of the big elements of that Brave New Worlds presentation was weather, and I want to jump in. We have a lot of weather questions, so I want to jump into some of these weather questions here. Outside of thunderstorms, what other weather conditions or systems are we looking forward to implementing?
Who was asking this just earlier in the stream?
So I'll take that. So there's several that have been discussed internally. We haven't confirmed which ones we'll necessarily do first, but like the things that have been talked about that are potentially on the cards are things like sandstorms, obviously snow, and then potentially variations of those like acid rain, rather than the type of thunderstorm.
Dude, imagine if it snows. Imagine if it snowed and the snowed persisted on your spaceship. Is that too much? Have I gone too far?
Which were intended to be our first target. In terms of what we're excited by, I personally want the sandstorms. I think the tech is quite well geared.
It's a classic sandstorm.
Really good, and
Lair sandstorm.
We've got some recent films that type of give a lot of nice visual cues. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of that in the game personally.
Be real honest with me. How much does seeing a major film, something like what you're talking about? I will just say it's Dune and whatnot. How much does that ever sway our priorities? Like, oh no, we really want to do that and stuff like this. You can be honest.
I mean, on the tech side, not enormously, I don't think.
Okay.
We're slightly at the mercy of the creative directors to tell us where we should put our energies.
Guys, don't hate on my snow. Don't hate on my snow wants. We need the snow.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I've seen plenty of films that have
can snap a panel off of my Drake ship and go snowboarding with some wreckage, or sorry, not wreckage, nice hull panels. Drake.
Recently they have sand and sandstorms in them and snow. I haven't seen an acid rain film recently. Maybe if there was one, it would jump to the top of the list, perhaps.
Of course, we do have planets like Hurston and several arid moons that would all benefit from that tech. So so sandstorm specifically is something that would benefit quite a few different locations.
Yeah.
Stick with weather for a bit.
Daymar stays being the coolest moon just because of the way it looks. It's like a really nice color.
Is there a plan or a roadmap to improve cloud layer look from orbit? Grid effect, night shading, etc. There are bits of info from devs on Reddit, but we would love to hear more.
That's probably going to be my question then. So thankfully the list for what we need to do for clouds is finally starting to get shorter instead of longer. Well, that's nice. We have the fundamental framework.
Dude, that's great to hear. You guys remember being on the other side of cloud generation? Like back when clouds... Folks, this game used to be so underdeveloped that clouds are one of the most common topics we'd talk about. Like throughout a quarter, we would just have conversations about what cloud tech could mean for the game and how it might come into the game and all these different things, because we didn't even have the cloud nebulas in the game. It was all just blank space. And so it's really nice to hear that the list for that is getting shorter rather than longer for once, because that's felt like it's just been around forever.
But there's obviously still quite a few more things we want to try and do, like improvements to shaping, shading, performance as well, and make them all more stable. As far as the tiling issues are concerned, that's more of a content thing as opposed to a tech thing. As in, we have plans to make tools that will definitely improve that and just produce better looking cloud formations with less of those issues showing up. Obviously, it would be nice if we could throw unlimited resources at everything, but we are still making a game and we have similar limitations to what we can render on the screen as all other games. It's just that our scale is a bit worse or better, depending on who you ask. It makes it a bit more difficult, but we definitely have plans and know how to tackle those issues a bit better in the future. And it's just iterating and learning how to best make the data to drive the system in the best possible way.
Yeah, I know that cloud tech has been something a lot of folks here were waiting for a long time. And yeah, obviously what we have is
There you go.
great, but like anything with Star Citizen, we're not one to generally rest on our laurels. So there will be a time where the development wheel turns its hands back to clouds, and we get more resources and more time to make that even better. Hey Graham, let's do an audio question.
Hello?
Oh boy.
With Star Audio and the new Doppler effect,
Or as a Brit might say it, stadio.
will we be able to hear the sonic boom in atmosphere? Also, we'll do 2 parts. Also, will ships like the Inferno be able to have a delayed burr? Sorry, like the A10 Warthog, and will we be able
That was
to
a good
hear?
good recreation
This
of
is
the
like
sound.
3 questions in one, guys. Okay, let's just do this one piece by piece. Will Star Audio and the new Doppler effect, will we be able to hear a sonic boom in the atmosphere?
Ultimately, yes. It's on our development plan, and it's not the most sort of difficult thing to do, but the more difficult things to do are the sort of fundamentals of making the Doppler sound good, making every sound that plays in the game work well with it. But we do have the data that we need in order to drive sonic boom. And as you saw at CitizenCon, we did some shockwave stuff on Distant Explosion.
I'm sorry, why does he look like he's from like a Sega Genesis game? Like even his hair looks like it is literally pixelated geometry from a game. I don't know what this filter is because we've seen him before. So
that's pretty much the same concept. So
get this guy a camera?
We will get there, absolutely.
Like a phone?
All right, we'll do the second part of this question. Also, will ships like the Inferno be able to have a delayed burr sound like the A10 Warthog?
Again, yes. It's all down to, I mean, it's kind of a content thing, really, to get the bird sound itself, but there's no reason why we can't then delay that and create the sort of horrific experience that you seem to be wanting.
I'm going to add a follow-up here. What are the challenges involved in making a delay seem intentional and not a mistake or a bug?
So they are those challenges are absolutely significant. One of the first things that came up when we first implemented a prototype of this was that when you walk away from somebody speaking and you start to see the lip sync go out, that's kind of like it's realistic, but people have seen movies often enough that they don't expect it. So we have to strike a balance between realism and the sort of the experience.
How fast would you have to move away from someone for the lip sync to change? Like you sprint away from them as you stare at their lips? You're like, is your talking changing?
People are a little more used to on screen. There's also the challenge of camera zoom. That's huge. So when the camera's zoomed in and the audio listener is actually significantly further away than it appears on screen, that causes problems. So we're having to overcome some of that as well. But yeah, there are plenty of challenges.
Okay. I think with there's a Starchitect question. Let's just hit here.
Oh boy.
Would Genesis produce any actually large settlements on the scale of small towns or cities, or would that require more bespoke work?
So, yeah, it will create. It can create as big as we want, really, but the intention is not to create cities. We don't have hundreds of cities. We want our cities to feel very unique. We want extra care and love to go into them. So we're not currently planning to build anything as big as a city with it. And you'd probably need to adjust the algorithm a little bit, to the scale of content to make that work. But But towns, definitely. Lots of small, medium-sized towns. Yeah, we certainly
See,
want.
dude, and our scale is so off with this right now because we started with outposts, which were single buildings, and then we went with landing zones, which are massive cities that you can see from space. And yes, the planets are smaller than a normal planet, but get the idea, they're huge. So when we think towns, we're thinking of something that's relatively small, but could be considered a full city in another game. Like I'm thinking of there's a city in Starfield, and it's like the main area where for one of the factions, I don't even remember who it is, but it's where you run into the dude who's played by Elias, the Deus Ex dude. Gosh, I don't even remember what the heck the name of the city is, but it's like a small city used as like a sort of a landing zone in Starfield. But that's like the size of the settlements we could be getting in this game with just these side locations they're building. I'm not saying it's going to have more content. It's definitely not. Those were handmade, built as major hubs for a single player game. But it does, I think it still speaks to the scale that they're doing for this kind of stuff. And it's going to be cool to be able to just come across random towns and random cities and random star systems that have different factions and lore and things you can pick up and equip.
As many of them as design think fits the game. And lots. I'm actually personally looking forward to lots of really tiny things. I want like mini settlements. I want like the guy in his caravan and all that. I want a bit more of that in the universe. But yeah, hopefully lots of small to medium sized towns. And once they get a bit larger, I think that's where you really want to handcraft it and make sure that it has a strong narrative backing for it from design.
That makes sense.
Why is my cam video on 12
During
frames
the
a second?
presentation,
I don't know.
There was a lot of terms used to describe different footage. R&D phase, early footage, gray box. Folks know this. There's a nice set list of terms for like ship development, but the same system doesn't really equate to graphic stuff. And when the panel was ended, this person was conflicted over where their expectations should be set. Is all of this still R&D with clever renders, or is this technology at a stage where it could potentially be used to actually build a planet at this point?
That's a good question.
So it's kind of a bit of a toss-up, really. We use the term vertical slice specifically, and that's something I'll kind of dive into a bit. We've kind of tried to do a bit of everything so that we can see the whole picture, and then kind of tweak our design from there and start finishing out each bit. And that means that yes, we could build a planet, but there's no way we could ship it. It's not performant enough, it's not varied enough, it doesn't check all of the boxes that we want. There'd be all sorts of problems with the tech that is working for the difficult bits but not working for the bits that mean that you can have 30 in a solar system and then 30 in another solar system and so on. One of the reasons we've approached it like this is because there's kind of such a fundamental change in the tech. Like the Genesis and the Planet Tech improvements are not just kind of changes to the output of the existing system. It is a fundamental kind of reshuffle and redistribution of work, which is largely because V4 kind of addressed the needs of planets, although the Planet Tech that we have kind of addressed the needs of planets as they were at 3.0. But nowadays there's a lot more requirements from that tech, whether it be kind of server meshing things, base building things, harvestables, persistence. So we've approached it from this vertical slice, which means yes, we can build a planet.
This is yet another time to write down in your books when they make it sound like the 3.0 era of stuff was placeholder, just almost in its entirety. Just something to keep people busy playing the game, doing things, and testing while they actually built what was really going to build the game, which was the engine, the stuff that we're now starting to see with 4.0 and beyond.
It's not the standards we want. But we're now at that point where we take that, we can say, okay, well, here's what worked, here's what we need to redesign, here is what we know is great, we've solved some of the big tech problems. Now we're transitioning to more of a kind of milestone-based approach where we're saying, okay, well, now we're going to finish out GPU spawning, and now we're going to finish out the orbital look and so on, and we can start kind of taking chunks of tech and finishing it. And I think one of the really important things as well is that we're not aiming to release this as one big floodgate and suddenly everything is out and boom, you've got Genesis. It's going to be features coming online bit by bit. And one of the early bits of tech is actually already in the 4.0 streams that are going out to EPTU right now. The Planetary rewrite of how we store and subdivide our planet and into patches and so on is already out there in the world and working. And that's kind of one of the benefits of having done this as a vertical slice. It means that we're starting to reap the benefits already. In terms of grey box, Seb, you can probably explain better what you meant by grey box in your sections. Sorry to drop you in.
Put him on the spot.
Sure. So like in our process, we usually have like white box, gray box, and then final and polish. For vegetation, doesn't really work that well, but like white boxes don't really represent vegetation as it's super well. So we just make a very rough version of it. Also, we were asked fairly late into the process of making the videos to add those labels, and we might have been a bit sloppy. So like the swarms were definitely further along than the jungle, for example. Jungle definitely very much what we consider white box. Swarms and redwoods a bit further along, with the swarms being the furthest. And yeah, it's all.
So it's just because the vegetation system runs on a different level than the rest of the game. Maybe because it's such an art-based asset, there's not as much that needs to go into the white box process. So white box, when it's vegetation, looks really good. Interesting that the jungle was at white box.
It's all coming together, and we are working through them. And a lot of what you've seen in white box is further along now and might be close to polished and final. And then we just need all systems, every other system, to make it into new planets and then release the
I
thing.
wonder what could that mean, though? Could the forests end up on Microtech, and what would hold them back from doing so?
No, I don't know.
Seb, I love you. So basically, as Will was saying, it's not an all-in-one thing. It is Genesis within Star Engine is a collection of multiple different tools that are all being developed at different paces, with different necessities, with different requirements of them, with different dependencies of other stuff. So certain things will come online faster than other things, which is another reason why we can't quantify at this point just how much faster it'll make making planets until all that stuff comes online with everything else. But like I said, you will already start to see stuff in 4.0, which is the Planetary stuff that you mentioned, and then with 4.1, 4.2, subsequent releases, as different elements come online and are ready for prime time, they'll be used to reconstruct certain elements of different planets and stuff to support other features like base building and stuff like that. So I know one of the things that often happens, because I've been doing this for more than a decade here now, is this idea that, anytime we say this is going back to the foundation, or going back this is a rewrite of this and stuff like this, why do they keep remaking this and stuff like this? This is the normal process of game development. The difference part is that you don't normally see this exposed to anything else. It's one of the things that makes Star Citizen unique, being in a live service environment during the process of making the game. So it's not any different or anything unique to Star Citizen and Cloud Imperium Games. It's other than you get to see it. So let's do a little asset distribution question. So with the sheer density of forests and similar biomes in Genesis, how might this interact with gameplay like landing ships or driving vehicles around?
Right. It's obviously for CitizenCon we made the biomes to look their most intense, most dense. So we want to see what does it need to look like at its most densest, I guess. But obviously with the new system and everything being having ideal conditions and less ideal conditions, you will have varying distances. They could be over multiple kilometers and just like have the forest, or like have something turn into a forest over a large distance, or it could be over some meters. So you get like clearings in the forests. The
that's
system will
cool.
support all of that. We've just only shown the most dense and the most purest version of each biome at CitizenCon. So that's why they look very dense. They're not very friendly for landing and everything, but it's going to be very unique and varied everywhere on the planet. So
of course you could find places to land. Like that would be crazy if you couldn't land your ship anywhere in the game.
Experiences depending on where you are.
We did see some areas where there were paths carved through like the jungle and the forest and stuff. So it is possible to create paths and stuff through this stuff.
Technically, yeah, but like they will also just happen naturally based on what data we put into the system and what how fertile the soil is in certain areas, and maybe that was a water washing it away, and then you have like a path cleared out from certain species of vegetation that don't want to grow there, or there's more. I'm not gonna say more rocks there, but there could be more rocks that don't allow for vegetation to grow, but stuff like that.
All right. So if paths generate naturally and stuff throughout the system with the rule set and everything, well-traveled paths eventually begin to they start to get wider, and they start to form what some people might refer to as roads. Anything you want to
Jared's like a built-in 10 for the chairman machine.
tell us about roads?
It's like, keep expanding. Come on.
I don't.
I can
It's a
say
nice place in Greece.
I can say regarding roads is that it's definitely something we want to do. A lot of the river tech when it was made made with kind of like roads in mind in
And
terms
lava.
of there's a lot of similarities in terms of kind of like dynamically creating and destroying things as you approach it across a long spline, because if you just load a mesh for a 100-kilometer road, that's obviously not going to work. But it takes some time and some investment into the tooling and into making the assets and getting design and so on. We want to approach it. We're not approaching it this second.
Yeah, just to add to that, we've got Will's done a lot of the
Do you see that look on Jared's face?
groundwork for that. So on the planet side, a lot of the work has been done, or wouldn't take much to go to take it further. There's not a huge difference on the planet side between a river and a road. Where the work remains is there's a bit of graphics work to do. Obviously, a road doesn't look like a river. We need whatever. Stylistically, we need to change there.
Yeah, they're going to have some like dynamic asphalt deformation system, and they're going to call it Star Ass or something, and it's going to be all about how roads can get wear and tear over time, and they'll build up elements from their surrounding biomes, so you'll have like dirty Star Ass versus cleanly laid Star Ass, and like CIG, man. They can't just implement roads. They've got to be star roads, and there's only one way to implement star roads, and it's over 4 years.
The whatever assets would be distributed at the side of the road would be slightly different to a river, but probably the biggest difference is we assume it would come from Starchitect. Like we have to place all these locations on the planet, and then we have to figure out what would be the logical distribution of roads. There will need to be rule sets. Does this planet support roads? Is there areas of the planet that will and won't have roads? Maybe outlaw bases don't have roads. They don't maybe want to be signposted with a big motorway.
So you gotta have those signpost things, dude.
Will. So it's that element that is the biggest part that's missing. And then obviously there'll be a bit of, once you have decided to connect to towns or locations, there's some code to figure out what is the best path to get between these two. Do I carve straight through every mountainside, or should I weave around them? Yeah, so there's a bit there. So on the planet side, we've kind of done it. That mostly on the tool side, we're deciding where the roads would go, and then a little bit of graphics to actually.
Yeah, the Star Citizen answer right there.
Literally, since planets were first introduced in 3.0, roads have been the most pressing and recurring question. Anytime we talk about planet tech on either ISC or SCL. So
The difference was a few years ago. It was like, well, where's the road going?
Right.
I'm driving out of Hurston, and where am I? Now we have a plan. There will be somewhere to go. So at least there's good reason for it now.
Fair enough. It's a good answer. I think folks will appreciate your candor on this. Let's jump back into weather. If it stops raining, will the puddles and ground remain wet for a while, or will they dry out immediately?
Yes, we've recently just changed that, so it does do what you would hope it would do. So it keeps track of the average amount of water in the ground, and it evaporates over time using a physically plausible model, which we tweak to be kind of a cross between whether you want it realistic or what feels good for the gameplay.
Dude, are you kidding me? Is he talking about water evaporating off the ground?
For some period of time after the rain has passed. So all good there.
Cool. And
okay, sure.
I don't know if this is a weather question, but somebody's thinking creatively. If you die in the water, for instance, in a swamp or whatever, do you float?
All we can recommend there is to take a really good friend with you to an ocean or a lake on Microtech, shoot them in the head and see what happens.
That's the best way to
You can
test.
do that right now.
Yeah.
Be my guest.
Okay. Just the views and opinions.
Y'all should specify you're talking about a game before YouTube automatically takes this off the internet.
Will Hain do not represent those of Cloud Imperium Games, Robert Space Industries, or its subsidiaries. Will we ever see, go back to asset distribution, will we ever see lakes, ponds, waterfalls, cliffs, or deep ravines?
We see lakes.
You already see lakes.
Yeah.
There's, 15 of them on Microtech and about 18 of them on Hurston. We want to take a look at things like smaller ponds that might form without kind of a necessary or a visible water source, but it's not kind of scheduled or road mapped. And along with waterfalls and deep ravines, it's stuff that we want to be able to do. And we are approaching a place where
I really would like for them to just, when these things come up, they should be like, that is not in 1.0. That's it. I don't want to hear any more. We want to do that, but it's not yet put in the plan. Like, does that mean, I don't know if that means it's supposed to be part of 1.0 or not. But I hope that they can start to just say, that is not in the 1.0 plan. That'll come sometime later. Yes, that is in the 1.0 plan. You know, give me that.
where we're in a better position to implement that, but they're not kind of like things that we have tasked out and planned out. Cliffs is something we are going to take a better look at as part of the current planned work for Genesis. People are always sharing that old canyon screenshot from Daymar, and that wasn't a viable way of doing that.
Hold on, we might actually have that. Let's see. Because, yeah, they showed us some canyons. Here we go. This is what they showed us back in the day that they were going to make for canyons in Daymar. And it never happened. It was real exciting. You know, it was exciting times. Hopefully, though, he is about to tell us why he is going to be able to do that. That's for a game director to say, not a dev. But it doesn't help to be able to hear that something may or may not happen. That's like, I understand that it might not be as good for a dev to be able to say that. But they're saying something. So this is just more of the canyon work. Oh, what the? Oh, that's something I recorded. A little more of this is just like them testing out what canyons would have looked like. Just the canyon tool. But what is he going to say about it?
That's across a planet, but we're hoping to come up with a more holistic approach for doing these cliffs. And we've already improved the cliff rendering in terms of what is shown on the terrain mesh itself, which is a big part of what's missing at the moment. So yes on that one, and the others are kind of like from my heart, I want to do them, but I have to wait for my heart to match the bullet points on paper.
Fair enough. Graham, this question is more a follow-up to the Star Audio presentation from last year, but we'll get into it. So Star Audio looked great. However, the audio engine in-game is already having a hard time. Weapon sounds stop randomly, and some audio simply doesn't work.
Yeah, the audio can make this game feel jank sometimes.
Is this technology a replacement of the entire audio engine, or simply an extension of the system we have?
Where is Claudius?
So it's absolutely been designed as a replacement.
Oh.
Some of those issues that you hear are due to some fairly naive culling of sounds, which obviously in Star Citizen you can't predict what's going to happen. We have a very limited budget for how many sounds we can play, how many ships we can play sounds for, things like that. And Star Audio it's absolutely planned to replace all of this stuff and improve all of these situations. So in the example of weapon fire cutting out, We have a much more intelligent budgeting system that will take into account the sort of importance of those sounds to the player at that moment, whether they're visible on screen, how close they are, how many other sounds in the sort of similar categories are playing. So we can definitely improve all those things with Star Audio. It's just a case of working through all our systems because we have audio systems hooked into pretty much everything the game can do. So we need to work through all those things one by one and get them all hooked into Star Audio. And eventually, sometime down the line, we won't have any of the old systems.
Eventually.
I'm going to follow up here. Karasaki in the chat simply asks, audio ray tracing?
It's something we've talked about a little in the past, myself and Ali, but never really been able to dive into it deeply. But it's certainly something I'd like to revisit because, for things like reverbs, for, understanding what materials are present in a room, understanding the
does audio not already ray trace?
That's something that we really would need.
I thought that's how it works when you can hear it around a corner.
Yeah, but it's...
or rather, not hear it well around a corner. Doesn't it have to path trace and see what's in front of it?
Let's let the graphics do their side of ray tracing first, and then maybe we can talk after that.
Fair enough. This looks like maybe it's a Starchitect question. Any plans, near or far, to incorporate ancient alien ruins / bunkers into the dynamic planetary systems? This person thinks it would be cool to uncover lore and a possible storyline about ancient galactic civilizations.
It would be cool. Very sci-fi.
That would be so cool. And maybe we'll do it, but would be lame if we spoiled it now, right? Can't tell you the things you need to discover until you discover them.
Yeah. I will say the seeds for such things have already been planted with things like this here, for those who recognize what that is from CitizenCon year past. It's like that. So yes, we don't want to spoil that, but I think you'll be happy at some point.
That's like, is there a single space-based IP that doesn't have some sort of alien race with like ruins and stuff? And there are plenty. You don't have to name them, or you could flood chat with the names if you'd like. I'd take down some notes, but it's like it's a thing. That's gonna happen. It has to happen. Maybe not an ancient race, but some kind of alien ruins and stuff.
Let's look back to, are there any plans for variable planet rotation speeds, obliquity, there's not a word we don't say every day, obliquity, axial tilt, orbit, eccentricity, and atmosphere makeup, or lack thereof?
As far as our side goes for planet orbiting, it could be turned on, but it's going to make quantum traveling anywhere very difficult because the system isn't kind of set up for that as far as we know.
Dude, are they actually going to do orbiting planets?
In terms of more complex kind of orbit, most of those things are totally possible with the systems that we have in place. We would depend on design and lore to explain maybe why we want some of those things. But yes, one of the things that we do need to do, of course, is axial tilt to match our seasons. The seasons are going to be coming, and actually we don't need to wait, unlike orbit, we don't need to wait for any other system to turn on seasons. We could turn on the seasons and just have it know where the tilt would be, even if we can't tilt or move the planets yet. So that is dependent on us finishing out that stuff and finishing out the content in terms of making it look right and so on. But yeah, very excited for this sort of stuff to come online when it does.
Okay. So I think planetary orbits are pretty much we're good to go. That's kind of a pretty big explanation of them. For anybody who doesn't know how seasons work, because somebody had asked, like, why does the orbit define seasons? Basically, it's because the tilt of the planet, like he was saying, tilts a certain way at a certain part of a planet's orbit. So, like, if your planet is tilted like this on the axis, but it goes around the axis like this, if you're halfway on the side of the planet, when it's tilted back like this, you're going to have shorter days and you're going to be colder because you're not as directly pointed at the sun. Whereas when you're tilted forward like this, you're going to have longer days and you're going to be hotter when you're tilted at the sun. Same goes for the southern half of the planet. It'll just be opposite because of the tilt. That's why like southern hemisphere has winter when we have summer, all that jazz. So basically what they're saying is in order to get seasons, they could tilt the planets and start sending them around the star. But as of right now, all the systems that run in the background that would depend on that, like quantum travel, aren't made to work with that. Now, I think what they'd probably have to do is make it so that the quantum travel system can predict where the location of a planet will be and then send you on your way there. The interesting thing about that, though, is that you're not going to be able to have bottlenecks that pirates can continue to sit on in order to lock down trade lanes. Trade lanes are always going to be moving, so pirates would always have to be moving, which complicates that gameplay loop. It also changes the way that value of commodities happens. On some days, you could have some incredible prices because you've got one planet that harvests something that sells really well on the other planet right next to each other, and on other parts of the year, that could be a terrible deal to make because they're on the opposite sides of the system. Like their orbits could define how the game plays over the course of time if the orbits are different from the real world, if they're different from each other. That's pretty nuts. And then I think this actually would introduce one of the most exciting things for me, which would be the possibility of irregular orbits. Imagine being able to have comets that could orbit your star once every 6 months. And I think this is like one of the best possible things for exploration gameplay. You get the planets orbiting the star once every 6 months. So for about 4 to 3 of the months that of that period of time, the comet is visitable. However far out distance it is, there's no invisible wall stopping you from visiting it. So let's say every time it leaves the system, it refreshes itself with like super valuable resources and stuff. As it comes back into the system, everybody tries their shot at getting out to it as early as possible, but only the best explorers can make it out there. So they get the best resources, they clear up, maybe they build a base on there to make sure they have a spot where they can continue to harvest, all that kind of stuff, right? And as it gets closer and closer to the central system, more and more people get there, and it becomes just like a natural part of the game in that system. A trade point, a place where there are bases, where people are running hauling missions, trade lanes, kind of like how Delamar was in Stanton originally. And then, it just goes back out the other way. But that would be like that's an amazing chance for a dynamic event. These events they've always wanted to seem super dynamic and systemic and coming out of nowhere. That's a great opportunity for them. That, as well as just doing that with planets too and their seasons. And here's the only other bit we ever learned about seasons. We looked at it earlier, but this was in CitizenCon 2021. And they were just looking at how seasons could affect plants. And I was like, maybe we'll do that. That would be pretty cool. I am surprised though to see them getting this into the game or getting it ready so quickly. And that's my spiel for exploration based on orbits. Please, CIG, please, let's take advantage of that. That'd be fun.
So on. But yeah, very excited for this sort of stuff to come online when it does.
Okay. That you bring up a good point that sometimes
guy's name on screen is Will.
Capable. You can't
Will Haynes.
turn it on or enable it because of other game-related systems that will break or aren't quite ready for it, like the quantum travel system. That's a good. I'm glad you pointed that out. Will planets such as Microtech get snowfall and snow accumulation?
So we'll be 5.
Snow.
Obviously, we need to revisit
See, I get my snow.
some of the data that every planet is based on, and the goal is more physical plausibility, and this is definitely a big part of what we want to do. Will has talked about the separation of different layers, and snow being the last one. Obviously, it makes sense to drive this purely by climate and temperature being the most important one for that. So yeah, there will be a technical requirement to do that, and obviously we really want to do it as well. just for more consistent, more believable planets, and it's gonna be good, I think.
Is this one of those
One
things?
day.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
Oh, I thought.
Will we be able to build snowmen?
that's for physics probably, and graphics, not me. So who knows?
Always
Allie,
kicking the
Snowman.
can.
I mean, I'd probably
Be like, sorry, that's for the props team, not for me. Sorry.
I'd be looking for leaving a snow trail and yellow snow before we get to snowman.
That's fair.
Is this one of those things where snowfall might come before snow accumulation, or is this one of those things where it's a 1-1, you don't get one without the other?
So we, like I mentioned earlier, we don't have we haven't decided for certain yet with creative directors which weather systems will come first, and obviously the more we work on weather, the less we work on some of the other aspects of Genesis. So some of that is still to be decided. But if snow was to become a thing, then it would be easier for us to release snow in places where already has snow on the ground. That would be a much easier thing for us to deliver. So that would be a potential shorter route for us. To make it snow in somewhere that has never had snow, just there's a few extra technical challenges there. You know, we have to build up the snow, and then we have to make sure the assets that are there, all the trees and rocks.
There is snowfall, but it's like
so there might be asset
kind of,
touch-ups to be done. So it's a bit
canned
more
animation
complicated
kind of
for
thing.
that side of it, and then to have the snow evaporate over time, melt. So snowing on Microtech is more likely to happen before snowing at the poles of a more temperate planet.
Okay. With the
Kicking the piss.
implementation of Genesis and
Now
the
you're
next
getting a nomad.
iteration of Planetech and stuff, will planets like Microtech be adapted to have biomes located in the correct places based on latitude? For example, frozen biomes around the poles and temperate forest around the equators.
I mean, do they
Yeah,
not
I
do
think
that?
it's basically the same answer I had on the last question as well. Like, it needs to be. Like, we need to make it all more plausible, and the data will be.
Gotta
and then
tilt those planets.
It'll just happen.
Fair enough.
And we kind of need for the weather, we need the data to be more physically correct so that the weather can match. We can't have it snowy in somewhere that's 20 degrees Celsius. So it comes hand in hand. The weather will be based on physically based stuff, but then Seb has to go and make sure the planets are following them physically based rules. With V5 it'll be automatic with the new planets, but when it comes to the older planets, we'll have to touch them up to make sure that they are plausible.
Okay.
Maybe some bits get more snowy or less snowy as that happens to make sure it all makes sense physically.
Okay. Will the mud? Well, okay. Let's look at two-part question here. Will rains create mud?
Yes.
Okay.
One
They're
of
gonna make
the
mud?
design points for the new planet shader is that the different soil categories.
Am I gonna slip and fall on my ass because of mud? I don't want to replay middle school, please. Thank you.
Like the kind of visual appearance of soil will kind of have a matching set of what they look like in different amounts of humidity. So you'll have a cracked clay and a cracked soil and a whatever, and then you'll have a damp and then a saturated and then like an oversaturated. I don't know, I've just pulled those categories out, but something like that. So that's kind of based from the beginning that we want to incorporate that into our data. And then so some of it will come from static data, like being next to a river or just being in an area where there is higher water availability. But then kind of transitioning these based on local rainfall is definitely part of the plan, yeah.
Okay. The
Yikes.
second part of this question is whether that mud that's created from the rain will affect the term they use is crossability, but basically uneven terrain or difficult. In D&D, we'd call it. Will it make difficult terrain for people on foot or in wheeled vehicles?
Yeah, that's. Am I gonna slip?
We can report the surface type back to physics, and then other systems can change their behavior based on that.
No way.
I don't want to speak for all the other systems.
They're gonna put on freaking custom slipping in the mud animations while I'm running.
that would have to then come and change their behavior. So the physics on the wheeled vehicles and the actors and so on. But all of these systems already do respect different surface types. Audio is another important one, of course, as well, because soil and mud sound very different. So by changing the surface type at some sort of threshold, we hope to be able to provide the information needed for this to the systems that would then change those behaviors.
God, that's going to be nuts.
This is one of the...
And they will do that too, because they want, like, this clearly, they want this to be a fully featured engine, whether that's because they want to license it out at some point or because they want to make other games with this. Clearly, this engine's being built to not just cover the needs of Star Citizen, but of anything that would need to be made. And so I have no doubt that they will do that with the ground effects when it comes to traversal. Hopefully after Star Citizen 1.0, we'll get the stuff that it needs, but I have no more doubt that the things that could make this game engine better in ways that don't seem obvious to us now will happen.
I don't know. I want to try and think of what I'm trying to say here. Only Star Citizens, and I mean this as a compliment, would hope that rain would create mud that would create difficulty traversing and accomplishing their goals. It's one of the shared interests between us and our fan base here, and I love that. I love that question. It's basically what I'm trying to get at, and I hope it's something that materializes. Do clouds move in one direction across the planet, or are they actually dynamic and move in all directions, forming cool patterns from space?
Do they swirl? That's what they want to know.
Right.
Do they swirl?
Conceptually, obviously, we've looked at a lot of papers and weather simulations and how clouds more form and move on Earth. And conceptually, they will follow the general planet's rotation from orbit and from a larger picture point of view. They will be deviating from its direction, though, just so you get like what you get in nature. Obviously, we might not be able to do the full thing, like running a full weather simulation on the servers might be problematic for performance, to say the least. So we're trying to make it as efficient as possible, but also look the best. So they will be able to deviate from the primary direction they are moving in. How far we can push this, we don't fully know yet. We're still exploring what we can do with the tech, how we can improve it a little bit further, and what we can do with the data to make it do more with the same amount, ideally. And but yeah, we definitely plan to have very varying weather patterns moving all over the planet in believable ways based on the data.
Make hurricanes,
that the planet
please.
is providing.
Just go all the way. Just make naturally forming hurricanes out at sea. That'd be cool.
Okay. I want to throw two questions from the chat in here. The first is from Jesus Pug, first time chatter. Can we cut down trees?
We've been asking.
What, as in today?
No, as in the spec for what we're working towards.
We're incorporating some kind of technology decisions into our tech at the moment that will allow us to better kind of support individual behaviors on assets, which is a long-winded way of saying that there's a lot of stuff that goes into being able to scatter 20 million trees across a planet and then being able to point at one of them and say, I want you to be chopped down. But we're bearing it in mind.
Good answer.
So I'm going to leave that.
No, that's a no.
Good answer. I knew I could trust you to answer to throw the curveball. The other question is
It's a no, and be
question
surprised
that's,
and nicely
dominating
surprised if it happens.
the chat right now, and that's what any of this means for ArcCorp.
Yes. Oh my God, yes. Tell us about ArcCorp, please.
ArcCorp is not built like any of our other planets. Everybody knows that. It's not built with the Planetech system. Does weather come to ArcCorp? Do any of these features come to ArcCorp? And can any of these features be used to improve or further develop ArcCorp in the future? Or is that something entirely different?
I mean, ArcCorp does use the Planetech. I mean, there's a lot of special cases on ArcCorp. It's shaded differently. We type of abuse the system a little bit to get the results we want on ArcCorp, to say the least. it probably will be a similar story. We're not planning on like, spending a year making bespoke ArcCorp tech. But there is parts of the new system that we're hoping will allow improvements on ArcCorp. Obviously, things about, the amount of light that will gather underneath a tree and whether a fern can grow isn't really relevant. But there are many other parts that are relevant with like the density, with the way we position things. We type of intentionally kind of randomize. We have a grid pattern for where we're going to put things, but then we randomize it. We could kind of just remove that randomization and get an actual grid pattern more naturally. And yeah, a lot of these rule sets, they're built for nature, but some of them, again, they're more powerful this time, so we might be able to abuse them again to get something nice out of ArcCorp. But that type of, we're not focusing on that at the moment. We're making sure that we can deliver every other planet, and we're hopeful that we will then be able to do something nice with ArcCorp at the end as a result, because all planets must eventually use this tech. There is no option long term. They all must use it. It's just a question of how much we have to change to make it suitable for ArcCorp. And which we won't fully know yet until we give it a bash.
Yeah. ArcCorp is an unnatural abomination.
It'll definitely get weather, though. That much I think we can say. It'll definitely get weather.
Okay.
It's actually surprising because I would think they'd say something about, see, I want ArcCorp to look like this, man. I mean, it does look like this, but I think it's still missing this scale, the difference in scale with the buildings. Because the cities themselves, the planets themselves are so small, it's harder to get this vertical scale. But I hope they can. There's also another picture I've been looking for here of ArcCorp, and it shows how ArcCorp is actually not all city. They have green areas. Here we go. So ArcCorp is supposed to be a place that also has green areas. It's supposed to have water. It's supposed to have some foliage, something that creates, the weather that takes place on the planet. I don't know if they're ever going to do that. They've talked about doing that in the past. They've also talked about needing to redo the buildings in ArcCorp to allow for building interiors and the initiative that they're doing there. But they didn't talk about that today either. So I don't know why they didn't mention these things. But those are things that I thought would have been more along the lines of, yeah, we need to go back and redo ArcCorp. But it sounds like they're actually pretty hesitant about that. So I think it could be longer than we were thinking until they go back around to it. Hopefully before 1.0.
Will Genesis allow for more realistic placement of mining nodes, being placed on the areas of exposed rock layers?
It does look like a park, but it's still a green area at least.
Cliffs, instead of being randomly scattered on the planet's surface.
That's definitely in the cards for sure.
In the cards.
I don't know if Will wants to talk about the whole entity thing, but conceptually, yeah, we'll definitely be able to have them. Right now, they're like tied to the biome they're in, but in the future, we can be more specific and spawn them on cliff sides or where the rocks fall down at the base of a cliff, and then you will find them there and stuff like that. It's definitely possible, I think.
I mean, yeah, I think we want to treat a harvestable like any other asset, in that if it's a mining rock, we want to spawn it according to parameters that we would spawn a regular rock. We kind of don't care whether it's here's a game entity that you can mine versus here's a static piece of geo. We kind of want to do them with the same rules, and it'd be the same for because you get those the revenant trees that you go and no, revenants are bushes, then there's the heart of the forest tree or whatever. We want to scatter them just like any other vegetation based on the same data and the same rules. So if you're asking, is it going to be more realistic, then I would say yes. I think Seb also alluded to the new kind of entity management spawning-y stuff. I don't think that's going to help the specificity of the locations, but it's definitely going to help the density of these things. And I won't elaborate into that right now because that's
I wouldn't take that to mean that any mineral is going to spawn where you would expect that specific mineral to spawn. I mean, they could do that, but I would also assume it's going to be more generalized than that, just to save our expectations, No?
The managed entity system is a very techie, boring subject that you can't cover without a TED talk.
Well, now we know what we're doing early next year. I'll come by your desk on Monday and talk to you about it.
Yay.
Graham, so you mentioned that Star
Sega
Audio
Genesis
is intended
Graham.
as a complete replacement of the current audio engine system. We've been talking about Star Audio for a little while. We introduced it, I believe, last year at CitizenCon.
Claudius.
What are the blockers remaining? What's between us now and the eventual implementation and swap out of the system?
Well, some of the biggest blockers are just the sheer volume of systems that we have running, and the design of Star Audio is that we take all the features that are embedded in those game systems and make them all part of the engine, and we're chipping away at that. So that's the biggest blocker for it to be covering everything, is that we need to have every single possible audio feature covered within the engine, whereas right now there's a lot of game code, a lot of very specific code for certain situations that's been designed for those specific situations. So it's all about making everything as generic as possible and making all these features available to whichever game system wants to use them. So it's the biggest blocker is the sheer volume of work involved. That's the only way I can put it.
Gosh. Tale as old as Star Citizen.
Will large ships be able to compress trees and plants to land in the dense forests? We talked about the paths and everything, but what if we just try to force it?
We can't cut trees down, but can we crush them into the ground?
This is kind of linked to what I said before with chopping down trees. There's kind of a few complications that come here. If you think about, I want to knock over a tree with my ship, that sounds like a simple behavior. But there's all the gameplay stuff about like how you would go around and chop a tree and the kind of design behavior from that. And so none of that's done. So we need to wait for that. And then from our end, there's kind of 3 core bits that we need to worry about. There's promotion, which is taking our very kind of highly optimized tree asset that renders in a particular way and is spawned by a particular system, and replacing that with something that we can interact with and uniquely address and tell what to do. There's the managed entity system, which I alluded to, which is essentially about making spawning of entities server meshing friendly and persistent. And then there's persistence itself, which is kind of like, okay, well, you've crushed a forest with your Idris. There were 700 trees under there that we now need to remember have not done something, and actually just creating 700 entities and chucking them in the entity graph is not an efficient way of going about that. So we need to make complex decisions, like if a tree becomes fallen over next to your base, you probably care about that tree. But if you knock over 500 trees on your way to New Babbage, we could probably come up with something different to record that there are fallen trees in this area, but not 700 unique entities for each fallen tree. So there's a whole ton of work that goes into stuff like this, and it's not even really kind of planned for or guaranteed at this point. All I'll say is that we want our system to be able to support more complex behavior and start to approach these problems. I don't know if Ali or Seb want to give anything more on that, but absolutely do not take this as any...
Who knew trees were such a big deal?
Sort of guaranteeing, just that, yeah.
So I guess the only thing to add is, there's the problems of, like Will said, about keeping track of how many trees. If you press your Idris 10,000 times and now there's 1 million trees that are being chopped down, we have some serious issues to type of figure out there. And there's obviously Seb staying quiet, but obviously if we want to chop trees, Seb has a lot of work to do. Unless they're just going to evaporate in a puff of smoke, that makes life easier. But yeah, if they it depends on the level of destruction.
Just let us beam the trees.
That also affects the entity graph stuff. It's whether we just remember 700 trees have gone away, which is 700 bits of data, or whether we have to remember that 700 trees have been carved up into 75 pieces and scattered around the universe. Then that's obviously more for the entity graph.
Start dropping trees from orbit.
People will be quite angry at us if we push it too hard. So some things to we're type of on the path. We know there's a momentum heat or a black hole dragon is in that direction, so we are paving the way for these kinds of decisions. because at the moment it's just not plausible. But
Yeah.
we're paving the way so that some decisions can be made as to the specific, how many trees can they be chopped or they just blow up or fall over, and
Yeah.
there's lots to be figured out in specific. Yeah,
It's
definitely paving the way for this kind of thing.
it's a slippery slope from
I
being
love how much of this episode we're spending on trees. Just trees, man.
able to chop down one tree with an axe or a chainsaw to crashing your javelin shallowly like the Enterprise saucer section in Generations and just taking out a 3-kilometer wide swath of trees in Microtech, which is exactly what people will attempt to do. So
In another game, you might say that the trees grow back in 10 minutes, but that's kind of not our game, is it? So
What's up,
we have to
Fate?
deal with the type of level of realism that we're aiming for.
Easy to do,
Implications.
barely an
It's
inconvenience.
a little bit harder. If you're going to gamify this, we could make it a lot simpler.
Get that reference.
Strake is in the chat is like, he almost said 3 mile. I'm trying. I've been living in the UK for 2.5 years now. I'm trying really hard to convert.
Man, 2.5 years already?
Not easy. In how much detail will planetary data be used to shape weather patterns, and what weather are you looking to simulate?
All right. So since we need to address the whole general V4 data versus V5 data anyway for the planets, and the clouds are just part of that process anyway, like they will come out of the same tool set basically. Our aim is to have a default weather behavior for a planet. If you generate a generic planet, it will just create ideally the weather patterns for cold air moving underneath warm air, pushing it up, causing cumulus clouds to form into cumulonimbus clouds.
Cumulonimbus.
And everything in between, ideally. And then also having warm air moving over cold air.
Seriously, we
which will
getting
cause
meteorology in Star Citizen now?
Stratus family of clouds to form. And that's like our default behavior we want to do for every planet if we need to. And on top of that, there will obviously be different things. As in, you have like a very planet with a specific need for a certain weather pattern, or like very different or alien planets with alien clouds, whatever that means. We don't know yet.
Alien and clouds.
And we just try to do that as well. But yeah, the idea is that we can cover as many different cloud types as possible with the resources we have, and then vary it based on individual planet needs. So yeah.
Why do you hate cumulonimbus?
It's a very hard word to say. They're really great. I love the clouds.
Beautiful
themselves.
clouds.
They're really good, and they're the only ones that make lightning. They're really cool. So more or
Very
less.
tall
Some
boys.
exceptions, but
All right. Well, we're in the end game here. Last weather question. Any plans for nature's wrath beyond lightning strikes? We're going to get as crazy as tornadoes, hurricanes, typhoons. How crazy are we aiming to go with this?
I mean, hurricanes and typhoons are the same thing, just different names depending on where you are on the planet. It's just like very strong winds, and from orbit you have this giant circling weather front moving around. We might not be able to do it like that from orbit. We'll definitely be able to turn up the knob a little bit on what our weather looks like compared to what you've seen at CitizenCon. Obviously, it needs a lot of work from different departments to make this all a coherent experience. Tornadoes, it's not really a weather cloud thing. Like, they move at a very different rate than the clouds will be able to move. So it would be more on VFX and graphics, and I don't want to commit them to do anything that they
Tornadoes
might not be
too,
able
of
to
course.
support anytime soon.
There's floods. Come on, where are the floods, wildfires? Like, dude, give us everything. I just want to live the terror that I already live in real life, of course.
But yeah, definitely we will have certain
Earthquakes,
planets with
then?
cyclones on them. If they will move the way they do in nature, we'll need to see how far we can push the system, or if they will be a little bit less. But yeah, I don't know yet. We'll see. We're still learning. We're still working with the data and the tools, and expanding them, exploring them, making better data, and you can expect a lot of iteration for the weather over the next few months and maybe years.
Ali, any thoughts on Aurora Borealis?
That one does actually come up a bit.
Turkey does have big earthquakes, yeah.
We would kind of like that one. all of the stuff in the atmosphere ends up being quite difficult, though, especially when they interact with each other. So the clouds and the atmosphere are in the same volume, and then the rain is covering the same, and then the ground fog. These things are all overlapping and quite problematic. For the Aurora Borealis, I take it. I mean, I've not looked into the science of it. I assume it's always above the cloud layer, isn't it? And if it is, that at least simplifies the problem a bit for the rendering side. We've certainly made accidents that look like Aurora before in VFX and graphics, usually bugs, sometimes intentional from artists. Yeah, that's one I'd quite like, personally, and it's possibly easier than some of the others. But it's also quite separate. You know, we have to intentionally decide we're going to stop doing this. Aurora is what we want to do, and we haven't quite had the creative direction telling us, like, do that now. Maybe we want Auroras for this next release, but it's certainly plausible. That came from up above.
Okay. Last two questions. Here's an oldie but a goodie. Will planets ever be scaled up more than their 1/8 size to real life for more realism, or as it is, the mountains feel small?
Okay. Now that they're talking about their points of interest being much larger than in number than they originally talked about, I would not be opposed to the planets getting bigger. Originally, I was like, that puts content too far away from one another. You don't be flying around the planet for a while. But with quantum boost and with points of interest everywhere, maybe you could scale it up, but I wonder how much that would mess with the rest of the game, the speeds they have us flying at, all that kind of stuff.
Write a check, Will.
Right. I think we'd like that because we feel the small too, especially as we introduce more and more advanced atmosphere. It kind of breaks our nice illusion that our planets are full scale, which I hope all of you continue to believe, because I certainly do in my heart. The thing about bigger planets is it stretches the complications with precision more, which we're hoping to be able to do away with, but that's one problem. Obviously, we need high resolution textures. At the moment, if we have a global texture and it's, say, 2K, that gives us a certain number of kilometers per pixel. And obviously, we have local data too. But if we make a planet have twice the surface area, then suddenly we have half as much resolution for the same kind of budget. So we need to consider those decisions and consider how the tech can deal with that.
This is going to be, I'm going to make a video out of this.
You also get kind of gameplay problems with that as well. If I make a real life-size planet, we have fast ships, but like suddenly getting from one place to another takes 10 times as long. And it's not necessarily good for gameplay to have that. So it's a convoluted question.
But it takes twice as long. Like that changes in my opinion because they have added so much more to planets than ever used to be in the conversation. I get what he's saying though, and it's nice to hear finally the different reasons why this sort of thing is not as simple as just, we'll just expand the size of all the planets, because I think everybody agrees there are trade-offs, there are pros and cons to keeping planets whatever size they are. I think right now the planets are 1/8 size, and then the distances between them and the moons are 1/6, or it's vice versa, something like that. And these are some reasonable explanations as to why they can't necessarily have them be as large. But with all the different things they're adding to planets now, I feel like, maybe we could figure something out.
We appreciate the reason that people are asking, though. We feel the same. But also, there's a certain amount of the why question, which I guess you can ask for a lot of our features, which is what we have works, what we have is great. Should we invest more time in making it bigger? Is that a good use of our time versus going and doing Rivers 2 or finishing out something else sooner?
Roads.
Whatever. Roads. So if you put up a poll that said Roads versus bigger planets, I bet Roads would win. So, yeah.
I'd
Take
probably
that
add
with
that the 8 times is probably, like I say, it probably pushes all of them aspects too much. Too low res, it's too much memory, it's too much of a knock on for the gameplay. A smaller increment would be more appealing, I think. Like a doubling or something like that, because just being able to double the scale of our mountains would be nice, and double the scale of our global features, mountain ranges. would be nice. So
Yeah.
something 2 or 3x, we know would be more chill, but 8x, it's pushing a few too many areas at the same time, probably. For yeah, and then the other thing we talked about, we didn't mention.
But that's the thing. It's like, it doesn't have to be all the way up to 1-to-1. It could absolutely be just a small change, just to give us more variability in the environments we're seeing, in the atmosphere we get, the way that the clouds are working, the way that cities are visible from orbit. I think there's a lot of things that could benefit from the planet's changing scale.
There's content density. We have to fill it with stuff as well.
You got Starkitect.
Starkitect hopefully helps fill that gap a bit, but we just don't want to, like, if the current game, we don't want to put things miles apart. But as we start to see the product of Starkitect, we might be able to see, okay, yeah, things are feeling too crammed and, you know, claustrophobic. Maybe we do need a bit more space, and we'll try and explore that. But yeah, probably 8x is probably pushing it, I think.
Hey, that at least makes it sound like it's possible that they get larger. So we'll see what they do. I would assume that they're going to stay the same size, but it would be cool if they, you know, went up a couple times, a couple levels in size, complicate them things.
And the last question, rock distribution. Ask about rock distribution. You mentioned a little bit of its CitizenCon and these things. I know not all these systems come online at the same time, stuff like this. A lot of the desire for roads, I think, besides the aesthetic stuff, comes from the incredibly disastrous and detrimental nature of rock distribution on ground vehicles. Is there some hope for us in the future of thinning these out a bit and making the ground vehicle experience, even as we wait for roads, a little more pleasant for people?
I mean, we can finally do denser and better vegetation, so maybe we can do less rocks now. But we do love rocks. I know, but kidding aside, with the new local data, the distribution will be different. It will not be as even anymore. The big rocks will be more out of the way to some extent, and it will be more obvious where they are, and you will most likely be able to drive much further without being constantly thrown around.
Please.
Yeah, it's not like we won't ever have places that do have a lot of rocks, but hopefully the most common scenario might be I'm driving down a valley. There's a nice clear path down here, but up on the sides, there's, like, you know, you can see the big piles of rocks coming down each side, but you can kind of make out a clear path, and it's not like just a random roll of the dice whether you're gonna rock like immediately in front of you. So we're hoping it feels better, but until we type of finish a planet, drive along it at speed, you know, we'll have to see. But yeah, we're hoping.
So when are you guys going to finish a planet? Like, that's
much more realistic.
That's what I'm trying to know.
Cool. And if it doesn't, I know where you all sit.
I'm in Germany. I'm sorry. for a while at least. So
I can get to Germany. I can find you. All right, folks, thank you so much.
For a while. Are they trying to get Germany folks to move to Manchester too?
In the chat, and if I can speak for the YouTube viewers later, we'll really appreciate your candor and information on a variety of topics related to Star Engine and Genesis. So thank you so much. Graham, thank you for hanging out with us. I know we only had a couple questions for you, but you stuck it out like a champ, and your answers were really great. I think folks are really looking forward to Star Audio and the wealth of improvements it's going to make for the Star Citizen experience. That's it for this week's show. If you haven't, check out yesterday's ISC. That was with Benoit and members of the UK networking team about all the different tech preview tests that are going on right now as we head to 4.0 and that release. Next week is IAE and something a bit different. There won't be an SCL next Friday. There will be something different in the place of ISC and SCL next week on Friday.
Guessing it's going to be a short video released in the lore that's kind of like that old Mercury Star Runner we got, maybe. Hopefully. I hope. Fingers crossed. Those are pretty cool.
So be sure you check that out. For SCL, I'm Jared. That's Pete on the dials. That's Lauren on the buttons. And that was Ali, Will, Seb, and Graham with the great answers. So thanks for watching. I'm Jared.
Yeah,
Take
very
care,
well
everybody.
might be Jax. Good call.
We'll see you next week on whatever that different thing is. See you then.
All right, folks. And that's it from me. Hope y'all got something from that watch through. I've got a couple of different things and videos that came up there that I'm probably going to publish separately. because I think there were some good points that people should know from in there. Some decent information though. Specifically this stuff about where they are in the process of applying these things was a pretty good one. But I'll probably have to go back through and watch this again.